Hello everyone, welcome to today's session on goods and service tax filings. So today we are going to see what are the common errors that are encountered by filling and filing of GSTR-1 return and how these errors are rectified or amended in the already filed GSTR-1 return. So we will see what are the common type of errors. With example, we will cover this segment. Then we will see how each errors are fixed on the portal. Then what are the portal techniques that are used to amend the records or rectify the errors. And finally, we will see the best practices for filing and amending the records in the GSTR-1 return. So before we proceed with today's topic, let us quickly see what we did in our previous session. So in our previous session, we learned about the final steps of submission of GSTR-1 return. We learned about the uploading of final output file, that is the JSON, on the GST portal. Then we learned about the summary generation and the preview of the generated return, and finally the uploading of return on the GST portal using the digital signature certificate or EVC. So now let us see what are the common type of errors while filing of GSTR-1 return. Categories of common errors. So there could be multiple level of errors like invoice level errors, then GSTIN or recipient level errors, then tax amount mismatches, wrong reporting tables, or technical upload errors, and so on. So let us discuss these. Let us first see what are invoice level errors. So invoice level errors can be like duplicate invoice numbers or wrong invoice date, that is mentioning invoice date that is beyond the return period or before the return period, or it can be incorrect invoice type like reporting of B2B invoices instead of export invoices, or there could be other invoice level mistakes like declaring invoices both in B2B columns and B2C large invoice columns, and so on. So if such errors are identified after the filing of GSTR-1 return, then it can be amended in the subsequent period GSTR-1 return using the amendment tables, that is table 9A of the GSTR-1 return. We will see these amendment tables later on. So next are the GSTIN errors. Errors like uploading of or entering of GSTIN of another recipient in place of the actual recipient, or it could be like entering of wrong state code or extra digits or not in proper format or transposition or anything. It could be anything. Such errors will impact the ITC of the buyer and the system will reject the invoice during upload. Again, this level of errors can be rectified in the subsequent period GSTR-1 return by using the amendment table. So the GSTIN of the recipient must be cross-checked from the recipient's registration certificate of GST before uploading to the GST site. Next are the tax amount mismatches. So these errors can be like incorrect bifurcation of CGST, SGST or IGST, or wrong tax rate applied, like applying 12% instead of 5% or 5% instead of 18%, and so on. Or there could be a mismatch between the taxable value and the tax rate applied on the taxable value. So the tax calculated by the portal and the tax mentioned in the invoice might be different due to the calculation error, or while issuing invoice of interstate supply, they have charged the CGST and SGST in place of IGST. So such errors are identified at the time of entering the data in the GSTR-1 return. Again, this kind of errors can be amended in the subsequent period GSTR-1 return using the amendment tables. So next are the table errors. There could be errors like declaring the B2B sales as B2C sales, that is, recognizing the registered sales as unregistered sales. This will ultimately affect the input tax credit to the buyer, and hence ultimately the business relation will get affected. Further, there could be errors like declaring the exports in table 4 instead of table 6, that is specifically designed for declaring the export transactions. Then there could be errors like declaring the debit notes or credit notes in other table rather than the table specifically designed for declaring debit notes or credit notes, that is table 9A. Such errors could also be rectified in the subsequent period return by amending the records. Also, GST table mapping guide is advisable to use for proper classification of table and selecting the proper table while generating GSTR-1. Also, JSON files generated using the offline utility must be verified after the upload in the respective sections, and the classification logic must be properly understood. So next are the upload errors or the upload technical errors. Such errors are encountered at the time of importing the JSON to the GSTR-1 return, or even after uploading the JSON file. There could be a scenario where some tables do not import the data therein, so it must be verified before the final submission. So such errors could be like JSON file upload failed, or there could be the processing of JSON file with error, or there could be invoices that are not getting reflected in respective tables. So such errors can be rectified by downloading the error summary generated at the portal and using the offline utility to fix such errors and regenerate the JSON file. So these are the errors that are generally encountered at the time of filing of GSTR-1 return. So let us have a quick recap of the kind of errors and how they can be rectified in the GSTR-1 return. So invoice level errors, duplicate invoice numbers or wrong data type. It can be amended in the table 9A or in GSTR-1A. So GSTR-1A is a new functionality that has been introduced to the GST portal. This we will discuss at a later stage. Then GSTIN error, wrong or invalid GSTIN. Buyers cannot claim the input tax credit as any input tax credit will not reflect in the buyer's GSTR-2B. This can also be fixed by amending the GSTR-1 return in the subsequent period. Then tax mismatches, example, wrong tax rate like 5% instead of 12%. Then CGST or SGST instead of IGST, that is selecting the CGST or SGST instead of IGST tax. This can also be fixed in table 9A or 9C in the amendment section to GSTR-1 return. Then avoiding manual errors. So to avoid the errors that are generally encountered due to manual typing, files must be validated before uploading. Offline utility must be used rather than manual entry where there are bulk or voluminous data. Then verify the tax values, dates and GSTIN of the buyer. Next type of errors that we discussed is wrong table or table errors. Example, B2C shown as B2B or B2B shown as B2C. Export invoices declared in table 4 rather than table 6A. This can be fixed by amendments in the subsequent period. Then there are uploading errors like JSON generation failed or JSON processed with error. Such errors can be fixed by downloading the error summary and fixing in offline utility and further then regenerating the JSON file. Next are the amendment rules. So any error or amendments in the GSTR-1 return can be done in the subsequent month's GSTR-1 return subject to a maximum of 30th November or the annual return filing date, whichever is earlier. For example, if during the month of February I reported a B2B sale as B2C sale in the GSTR-1 for the month of February. So I can amend this record in the subsequent period GSTR-1 return, that is in the month of March or April or May or June, but subject to a maximum till 30th November, or if I have filed my GST annual return before 30th November, then such date will be the last date till when I can rectify the error in my GSTR-1 return. So amendments can be done using the amendments table at the bottom of the GSTR-1 return. This we will see. Also, a new concept of GSTR-1A has been introduced to the GST portal. So if you have filed your GSTR-1 return, but before filing of GSTR-3B return or the due date of GSTR-3B, you realize that you have made a mistake in the GSTR-1 return, then the same mistake can be rectified in GSTR-1A, but it can only be rectified before the filing of GSTR-3B or before the due date, whichever is earlier. So best practices. It is always advisable to reconcile the books and the returns on a monthly basis. Then before the final submission, preview the GST return generated by the system, and buyer communication is a must so that input tax credit loss is not there and no business relation gets affected. And finally, before uploading and submitting the return, a final checklist must be there to ensure all the disclosures. So those were the errors and the amendment rules for GSTR-1 return. Let's have an overview of the GST portal and see how amendments are affected in the GSTR-1 return. So here we have logged into our account. So let us first select the previous month's return. Suppose we have committed some error while filing GSTR-1 of the previous month in the B2B segment. Let us open the B2B invoices. Suppose in this invoice we have committed some mistake. So we will just copy this. And now let's go to the current month's return. So let us select the period June GSTR-1 return. So here, after the original entries, these are the tables for original entries. There is a amend record detail option here. We have to expand this. So once we expand this, there are multiple tables for amendments, like amendment in B2B invoices, amendment in B2C large invoices, amended export invoices, amended credit or debit note registered, then unregistered, then amended B2C others, amended tax liability advance received, amendment tax liability of advance adjustment, then amended supplies made through e-commerce operator, amended supplies under section 9(5). So let us open the amended B2B segment. Here we have to enter the invoice against which we need to rectify an error. So here we will enter this invoice number and click on amend record. Once we click on the amend record, the invoice details will open. So this was the original details as filed in our previous month's return. So suppose we need to change the GSTIN, then we can change the GSTIN, but this can be done only once. Then we can revise the invoice number, invoice date. We can also revise the total invoice value and the place of supply. So if we change the place of supply, the nature of tax, that is CGST, SGST, will also change to IGST. Here we can change the rate of taxes that we have selected. We can shift from 5% to 12% or 18% if the correct one is 5% or 18%. Then we have to save the record and we have to go back. So this record will get saved and it will be rectified in the return. Similarly, we can amend the B2C large invoices record. We can amend the B2C other invoices records, and all the other records can be amended using the amendment fields. So that's it for today's session. Thank you.